President Biden said what in his speech? I gotta hear this. I can't believe I'm talking about politics. First of all, if you're new to my channel, welcome, and you may want to listen to the pig so you don't miss out on upcoming content. Recently, there have been claims circulating that President Biden is going to reduce Americans' red meat intake by 90%. Something smells a little bit funny here. This all came after his speech at the Virtual Leaders Summit on Climate. What a weird name. Are they virtual leaders or actual leaders? All of a sudden, loads of news came out of this. Let's watch it together.
Finally tonight, do you like red meat? So the cows must go.
Say goodbye to your burgers if you want to sign up for the Biden climate agenda. Researchers say you'd have to cut about 90% of red meat from your diet. For Americans, that means a limit of 4 pounds of red meat per year.
Americans would have to cut red meat consumption by a whopping 90%. That means only one burger a month.
Part of his climate or green targets are to cut our red meat. He wants to cut out 90% of the red meat that you all eat. That's 4 pounds a year.
Listen, 4 pounds a year, that's my weekly consumption of red meat at minimum.
Beyond the possessive your language burger when we're actually talking about someone else's body, the euphemisms that are used to distance ourselves from the victims, and laughing about how much of someone else's body they're eating, and also, surprise, surprise, you can eat a burger without someone's body in it. I only get one burger a month? Which is all probably a whole separate video. What about this claim that the government's gonna force Americans to reduce their red meat intake by 90%? That doesn't sound real. That's because it isn't. Biden's speech didn't even contain the word meat. They seem to have conjured these claims out of thin air. A few days later, this sorry but not sorry retraction came out.
On Friday, we told you about a study from the University of Michigan to give some perspective on President Biden's ambitious climate change goals. That research from 2020 found that cutting back how much red meat people eat would have a drastic impact on harmful greenhouse gas emissions. The data was accurate, but a graphic and a script incorrectly implied that it was part of Biden's plan for dealing with climate change. That is not the case.
This retraction is like saying, well, the data is correct, but we just used it incorrectly. I mean, that would be like saying, well, 90% of Americans are going to have to put solar panels on their roofs because the data shows us that will help with climate change. It was manipulation, pure and simple. But by the time it got out there and the news had circulated over the weekend,
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert tweeted about it and just accepted the premises hook, line, and sinker. Donald Trump Jr. tweeted about it.
how many people are actually going to be aware of the retraction that was snuck in there on a Monday? But rather than get into the tactics there, I'd like to talk about this policy itself. Even if this were true, which it's not, I'm skeptical it would even help our fellow animals. Because even if we cut our red meat consumption by 90%, unless we're also eliminating our other forms of animal use, whose bodies are we going to be replacing that red meat with? My guess is chickens, turkeys, fishes, and who knows who else. I'm also a bit curious how a ban like this would even work. The data does seem to suggest, though, that the dietary aspect of veganism substantially helps with our carbon footprint. The Joseph Poor study from 2018, which was a robust meta-analysis covering 38,700 farms and 1,600 processors, came to the conclusion that most strikingly, impacts of the lowest impact so-called animal products typically exceed those of vegetable substitutes, providing new evidence for the importance of dietary change. And in a lot of ways, this might be the easiest way for us to make an impact in our day-to-day lives versus buying a $30,000 or $50,000 electric car. Or in the case of the new Porsche Taycan, $80,000. That's enough money to buy a whole lot of hummus. This whole story also demonstrates, surprise, surprise, a huge human-centric focus. Because if we were actually talking about the victims involved here, we probably wouldn't be focused so much on greenhouse gases. So while this does seem to be an attempt to disrupt the climate plan, which may work in the short term, I'm curious about the long-term impacts. Because the groups that oppose these types of legislation in the first place actually just did a pretty damn good job of communicating why animal use contributes to our carbon footprint. This also is an example to me of how quickly and easily misinformation is spread. One thing I like to try to apply to my own life is the Socrates triple filter test, which challenges us to ask ourselves before we spread information, is it true, is it good, and is it useful? And in this case, the fact check clearly would have shown that it is not true. Think what kind of a world we could live in if everybody followed the Socrates triple filter test, or at least news organizations whose whole role is to inform the public, not misinform them. This to me is also conclusive proof that animal use and politics is entangled. Now, this isn't to say you have to vote for a certain political party to be vegan. Let's be honest, no mainstream party actually aligns with the non-rhetorical idea of animal rights. But what this does mean is that animal use is clearly political and perhaps nonpartisan. So even while living vegan may not require voting for a particular political party, governments and the state obviously influence the way society views and uses our fellow animals. The other thing this touches on for me is subsidies. This is such a unique ground because there's a lot of people that oppose overtaxation and want a limited role of government, and then there's the animal advocates who want all breeding, use, and killing of our fellow animals to end. There's actually some overlap here. I mean, 2020 marks one of the highest levels of subsidies in recent history. Nearly half of animal users' net income actually comes out of taxpayers' pockets. This to me is just so over the top unjust because you have an industry that uses our fellow animals that largely causes pandemics, and now they're getting bailed out at a phenomenal rate because of the pandemics. This is creating a vicious cycle between the subsidies and the pandemics, and because of special interests, the farmers always win. Imagine living in a world that's so violent, even a fictitious attempt to dismantle a small portion of that violence is met with society going into a veritable tailspin. Thanks as always for all the liking, commenting, and subscribing. It really does help me to know that these videos are worth doing. Do you know anyone who thought this 90% reduction in red meat was real? Or perhaps someone who would have a strong view on any of the topics we've discussed here? Why not drop them a link to the video real quick? It may spark a dialogue which could help us to address some of these moral questions. If YouTube's doing its thing correctly, there should be all kinds of boxes popping up here. So go ahead and click on the one you want to watch next, and I'll see you over there. Otherwise, do you want to miss out on the next video? I didn't think so. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. See you next time.